Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Isaiah, the 11th chapter. And as you can see in the subheading here, Righteous Reign of the Branch, we're just going into the Messiah, right? And the peace that he would bring, or that the peace that the world would enjoy under his reign and his righteous rule. So this is the book of Isaiah chapter 11 verse 1. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse. And when you go into the word rod, it means a branch out of the stem of Jesse. So when you have a tree, right, it's planted first, as a seed in the ground, and then it germinates, and then you have the roots that are, deeply embedded in the soil, and then it starts to bud, break forth out of the earth, and then grow and grow and grow, and eventually you have a stem, a strong stem, and then it grows more and more into into the branches, and then from the branches you have the leaves that then grow on, and then you have that big old tree. So here it's likening, it's basically talking about the family tree, right? That's what they call the family tree of King David, because the father of David was Jesse. So if he's likened onto the rod, then those that would come forth of him would be likened onto the branches from which you would have the fruits in the tree and so on grow on. So here it's saying that there's going to come somebody from the family line of Jesse, right? Or David, I should say here. And a branch shall grow out of his roots. And this is just another way of saying the same thing up here. Okay. It says here, and that's talking about the Messiah, right? Yahushai. And the spirit of the Lord Yahweh shall rest upon him, and the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. So he would basically have that great portion of the spirit of the Lord upon him, blessed with these traits and attributes. Verse 3, and he shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord. And then now you have the face value meaning, right, of like to be of quick understanding, meaning like you would grasp things quicker, right, and grow faster. But when you go into the word here of quick understanding, I believe the use case for Isaiah 11 is actually to delight, like metaphorically. So it's rayach. And so it says here, one of the definitions is to of delight, metaphor. So if we look here in the Gesenius Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon, let's see. There's Isaiah 11. Here we go. So it says here, hence generally to delight in. You have Amos 5:21. You have Isaiah 11:13, or Slaki 11:3. His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. Okay, so going back to Isaiah chapter 11:3, in other words, right, he shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord, or he shall delight, right, in the fear of the Lord, which is, we saw that when Yahushua was on the scene, right, he let it be known abundantly that his will was to do that, the will of the Heavenly Father, right, to accomplish what it is that the Heavenly Father sent him to do. So he was a very obedient son to his father. And he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, right? So not being a respecter of persons, and not judging after just what he sees, okay, or what may seem apparent to him, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears. And so his judgment, his ruling is not going to be based on just what he sees or what he hears from others, like hearsay or whatever the case is. But with righteousness shall he judge the poor. So one example I'll give is when you go to the time of King Solomon, the way King Solomon was able to judge righteously the matter of the two mothers about the child, right? They were arguing about whose child it was. It wasn't based on which one looked more distraught And it wasn't based on the stories that they were telling him per se, but he judged righteously by using, the wisdom the Lord blessed him with to decipher and make the correct call, rather than just going based off of what he was seeing and hearing alone, because that alone will not give you the full picture. But as it says here, but with righteousness shall he judge the poor and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. So that meaning basically reprove with fairness for the meek of the earth. Now, when you go into, or you see the term like meek of the earth, when you look at the earth, you have the heathen nations and then you have Israel. Okay, and so collectively on that scale, the meek collectively would represent the Israelites. Okay, and then on a more granular scale, the meek in general or in total would be the elect of the nation of Israel. But generally, when you see like meek of the earth, it's collectively referring to Israelites. It says here, and he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth. Now, you typically would have a rod like as a ruler or a master, or even like a shepherd or somebody in a position like that, and you would use it to smite the person or the animal to correct them, to get them to go in the right way. So here, what it's likening the correction, right? Him smiting the earth, like as if one was smiting a servant or smiting an animal, but here with his mouth, right? With the rod of his mouth, meaning he wouldn't need to use a physical, literal rod to smite the earth, but with his words or with his commandment, he would reprove the earth, because by smiting the earth, it's really the inhabitants of the earth, right? And then it reemphasizes the point with different words, right? And with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. And the breath of his lips, meaning by his words, because when you, the breath of your lips, like if you look in the wintertime, right? If you look at people talking in the wintertime, you see that breath coming out. And because it's cold and your breath is typically warmer, you'll see that air in the air, that air in the air. You see the breath in the air as they talk, because as you talk, you're exhaling. That's why if somebody was to go on a tangent and just keep rambling, they'd have to stop for a second and then breathe or take a breath, because they're constantly exhaling. And that's through them using their words. So the breath of his lips, meaning by his words, he shall slay the wicked. And a visual of this is in the book of 2nd Esdras, the 13th chapter. And I'll just get to that precept real quick. In 2nd Esdras, the 13th chapter, when it goes into, here we go. So in 2nd Esdras 13, it gives you the image of the return of Yahushai and how the world under this wicked rule of Esau Edom, the militaries of the world gather together to come and fight him. So 2nd Esdras chapter 13, verse 8, and after this I beheld, and lo, all they which were gathered together to subdue him were sore afraid, and yet durst fight. And lo, as he saw the violence of the multitude that came, he neither lifted up his hand nor held sword, nor any instrument of war. But only I saw that he sent out of his mouth, as it had been, a blast of fire, and out of his lips a flaming breath, and out of his tongue he cast out sparks and tempests. So now Yahushua didn't turn into, some Naruto character, spitting fireball jutsus and stuff like that. Okay, but the fire came out of the chariot that Yahushua was in at his commandment, okay, or at his order. So going back to Isaiah 11:4, by the command of the Lord, right, he would smite and reprove the earth and slay the wicked. So one visual is in 2nd Esdras 13. Another is also in Luke, right, where the Lord says, those mine enemies that would not that I should reign over them. Now, if the Lord is righteous, his enemies would have to be more on the wicked side, right, or ungodly. But he says, bring them hither and slay them before me. So, that in itself would be giving the order, because usually a king or ruler in that stead doesn't, it's very seldom that you would see them physically themselves go and get bloody. Most of the time they would give the order to have it done, but that deed would be attributed to them anyway. So long story short, he would basically come and set things in order. Verse 5, and righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins. So today you have a belt. Back then you had a girdle, which was around your waist to keep your garments in place. And also, like the term gird up your loins, because of the robe or the garments that men and people wore in the ancient world. If you had to run or fight or move freely, you would have to tuck the ends of your garment into your girdle, right? So that's where you get the term gird up your loins. You would grab your garment and you would tuck it into your girdle, which is around your loins or your waist area, to give you that free range of motion to then move more freely. But here it's emphasizing the how he's gonna have righteousness basically around him. He's gonna rule and hold things together and in place in righteousness, because that is what a girdle does as well, right? Holds things in place. So it says here, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins, which is just other words for saying the same thing. Verse 11, the wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid. So this is like a visual of the Messiah coming forth, right, and bringing a reign of peace. Now, remember, this is in the book of Isaiah, right, in the writings of Isaiah. And Isaiah was quoted quite often in the New Testament. So when people thought of the Messiah and his return, you can see why when Yahushua came on the scene when he did in the New Testament, they were asking, well, you're here now, and the prophecies about you coming, like when you read in Isaiah, show that you would come and restore us to a better state. And these things that we're about to read, or we are reading here in Isaiah 11, you can imagine that they were probably thinking that was the time in which he was going to do that. So when the disciples asked, are you going to restore the kingdom now? They're probably thinking of these kinds of things or prophecies that the Messiah would do. And that also made it, you can sort of see why he was then like a stumbling block to many others in Israel, because there were a lot of other precepts that show how the Messiah would be the restorer and bring peace and set things back up in order. But Yahushua, when he came on scene at that time, right, wasn't to do that just yet. It was really to set it in motion, but that wasn't the full fulfillment of it yet. And that was a painful lesson that they had to learn at that time, right, to have more patience. But here we are, closer now than ever. So now we're waiting for the Yahushua again, but this time when he comes back, he's going to do what we expected him to do back then. And through his reign is where you're getting this visual here, i.e. the kingdom, right? The kingdom of heaven, because he's going to usher that in. And that's where you're going to have, right, this visual here, Isaiah 11:6. And the wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the kid is a baby goat. Now, that doesn't happen today, except one of them is dead. All right. A wolf doesn't lay down with a lamb here when it's saying this in peace and harmony. But today, that's not the case, right? Wolves kill, hunt, devour lambs, and leopards do not toy with baby goats. And the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. See, so once again, that visual of peace, to where you're not having, today they call it like, nature, right? Animals devouring one another and the food chain and all of that. And today, if your child was anywhere even near a setting like that, your heart would jump. But it's showing you that in the kingdom, it's going to be so peaceful that even a little child would be able to command or lead these animals, and you or them wouldn't have fear of anybody getting hurt. So imagine a little child playing with a lion or a leopard or a lamb, or a wolf, or just today, like when you have children, they may have these stuffed animals, and then they'll have like, I don't know, Mr. Lion or Mr. Lamb Chops, or Mr. Wolf, and they're all at one table. They're playing make believe, right? They have that table, they got the tea. Okay, it's your turn, Mr. Lion. Then they'll grab the house pet, right, the cat, and dress it in clothing and force it to sit there with them too, right? But in the kingdom, imagine them playing with actual real life animals, right? Actual lions and lambs and wolves, because it's going to be peaceful. Verse 7, and the cow and the bear shall feed, their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. So straw is going into like hay or grass or, something that is not meat. And what this is letting you know is that in that time, these wild animals, basically they're going to become like herbivores, right? Because now they're really majority carnivores, or some even omnivores. And a carnivore is one that eats meat, right? Carne. Herbivore is one that eats herbs or grass or greens. So you have like cows. Cows don't really eat meat, right? They graze. They eat, grass and hay and all these other things. And omnivores eat both. So here, when it mentions the lion eating straw like the ox, it shows you that the Lord is gonna set things in a peaceful order, to where you're not gonna watch The Lion King or Animal Planet, and here it is, you're seeing this like, they'll narrate it to where you have this this like gazelle, and she's sacrificing her life for her little ones because this like wild lion is like killed one of her little children, all that stuff, right? They're all going to be at peace. Verse 8, and the sucking child shall play on the hole of the asp. A sucking child is one that is not weaned yet, right? So they're that young, probably under 3 years old. But imagine that, to where an asp is like a poisonous snake. So the hole of an asp is their like den, right? Because you have certain snakes that are sort of like in the ground. See if I can find a visual of this. Snake den in the ground. There we go. Oh, actually, we can even read it. Snakes rarely build their own nests. They typically inhabit or repurpose burrows dug by other animals like rodents, chipmunks, or moles. So this is like the hole, right? Or as it's worded here, the hole of an asp, or the cockatrice's den, right? So this would be like that hole, and you would have those serpents in there, and then they could pop their head out and stuff like that if you're not careful. Yep. So going back here, so you would like, it would be so safe that even a child, right, an infant, can play around right around the hole of a serpent, right? That's going to this word asp, and it'll be normal. It wouldn't be something that you're like losing your mind over, right? A snake, a venomous serpent, perhaps cobra, adder, or viper. And it continues, and the weaned child. So now a child that's, I believe, around 3 years old was at least in ancient Israel, Hebrew culture, was when they would be weaned. But they're still a child, right? And they shall put, like it says, and shall put his hand on the cockatrice's den. Saying the same thing in other words. And a cockatrice, if you look it up here, is also a poisonous serpent, a viper, snake, or adder. So there's a visual of that. And they wouldn't be hurt or harmed. And that's what this visual is emphasizing. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain. And that holy mountain is going to be the dwelling place of Israel. Okay, now if you look, for example, at mainly throughout the scriptures, Jerusalem is a mountainous place, right? And it was set apart from the rest of these nations as dwelling places. But in the kingdom of heaven, that holy mountain is going to be the dwelling place of Israel, right? Because that's where the spirit of the Lord is going to be, right? That's where the governing body of the world is going to basically come from, and so on and so forth. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord Yahweh, as the waters cover the sea. Okay, so if you look at the seas, it's very vast, and it's basically filled in every nook and cranny with water. Similarly, the knowledge of the Lord is going to be all throughout the earth. And this shows you that this is a future prophecy, because right now, the knowledge of the Lord is definitely, let's just say, it's not established throughout the world, right? We're pushing it out now, but that's not, the world does not live by the ways of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. Verse 10, and in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, right? So going back to that, to Yahweh Shai, that the same one that was mentioned as like a branch in the first verse, which shall stand for an ensign of the people. And an ensign is likened onto a rallying point, right? A place where you would go to. To it shall the Gentiles seek, and his rest shall be glorious. Now it says the word Gentiles here, but if you, it's really dealing with Israelites. And when we read the subsequent verses here, it will sort of expound on that. Because for one, the other nations, all right, or Gentiles, that like the actual heathen Gentiles, right now they're not seeking the Lord. Okay, they're not seeking Yahweh Shai. They're not seeking Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. In fact, even not all Israel is seeking Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. And when you go into that word seek, it's darash, which says here to resort to, seek with care, inquire, resort to, frequent a place. So it's a place where you would frequently go to, right? To be required, to be sought, or to be sought out. Okay. Now, ultimately, in the kingdom of heaven, once everything has been established and these nations have been put in they've been subjected and brought back into their proper minds of how the way of the Lord is and all of that, the scriptures do tell you that they will come up, right, to say, let us go to the roughly paraphrasing, the God of the house of Jacob, or the mountain of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways. So ultimately that will happen. But primarily that ensign, or that rallying point, which is Yahweh Shai, his when he said, if I be lifted up, I shall draw all men to me, he's really referring to his people. Okay, that's where it starts first and foremost. And then it mentions, and his rest shall be glorious, right? Because when he comes back, right, he's gonna, starting now, we're already seeing that point and rallying to Yahweh Shai, or Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, through his word, right? The scriptures say, one, lo, he comes in the volume of the book. And it says, he said, my sheep hear my voice, right? And let me see if I can find it so I don't butcher it. Hear my voice, or heareth. Maybe it should still pop up. Yeah, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. See? So it starts now, right, in rallying to Yahweh Shai through this word and seeking him. And it mentions Gentiles because when you, as I said, when we read on down, it'll mention the scattered of Israel and, different Israelites all around the world, which prior to us waking up, we were likened unto Gentiles, right? And I believe even the apostle Paul mentions, right, how we were in past times Gentiles. Okay, it doesn't mean we were heathens, but we were living like heathens in that state of mind. Verse 11, and it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Cush and from Elam and from Shinar, right, Mesopotamia, and from Hamath and from the islands of the seas. Okay, so this meaning, you have Israelites, his people, right, the remnant of his people. You have Israelites that are scattered in all throughout the world. That's why it says shall be left. So you have Israelites in different parts of the world. Let me give you one example. When you go into the history, and you had the Assyrians deported Israelites of the northern kingdom and took them into different parts of Assyria. When Assyria went down, and you had a good portion of the northern kingdom basically took counsel to leave Assyria and come to the Americas. Not every single one of them left, right? So now imagine those that stayed and continued to have descendants and children. And from all that time, we're talking around like 700 and something, 600 and something BC up until today. And had children. So if you looked at them, you just by looking alone, you probably wouldn't be able to tell at all if this person was an Israelite or not. It would look like a straight, because now even the modern day Assyrians don't look like how they looked in the past. Okay, if you read the book of Tobit, Tobias, right, which received advice from his father, he didn't come to the Americas, right? He just left from where he was because his father warned him that Nineveh would be destroyed. And so similarly, you have Israelites that were taken into foreign lands in captivity, and not all of them returned. You have Israelites that migrate, move to different areas, different cities, different places. All throughout history, different events have caused people to move and relocate. So quite literally, you have Israelites that are scattered in all of the earth for various reasons. So here is just listing a few of those countries where you would have the remnant, right, of Israel scattered amongst them. And the way that the Lord is going to recover the remnant of his people is going to start by this word. And that's why Yahushua said, this gospel shall be preached throughout all the world, and then shall the end come. Because by the gospel being preached throughout all the world, that is how the remnants that are scattered amongst these different nations hear it. They wake up, and then they are drawn to that rallying point, that ensign, mentally and spiritually first, before being physically recovered or taken up from these different regions, or gathered, I should say, from these different lands. So verse 12, it says, and he shall set up an ensign for the nations, right? Once again, going back up, an ensign, as it says, going into the root of Jesse being an ensign, to it shall the Gentiles seek. Well, it's the same thing it's saying here again, right? He shall set up an ensign for the nations and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel. So now it's letting you know who it's referring to when it says the nations. It's referring to the Israelites that are scattered amongst them. They are the ones that are going to be assembled, i.e. the outcasts of Israel. So when you assemble something, you bring it together, right? And that's what the Lord, as per this prophecy, is going to do, which he's doing that now. It says here, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. So that's what is meant by the nations. Verse 13, the envy also of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Now keep in mind that even at Isaiah's time, when he is prophesying this, or even receiving this vision, you had the war between the southern kingdom, which is collectively referred to as Judah, and the northern kingdom, which was collectively referred to as Israel or Ephraim. Okay, and there was this constant going at each other. So when you go into that word envy, it goes into also like anger or wrath from an adversary. And when it says here, the envy of Ephraim shall depart, meaning that Judah will no longer, or even the tribes will no longer have that anger or envy or malicious feeling towards the northern kingdom, right? Starting from back then, which was like, intense war, even up until in more recent times, right? Which it was like that almost like that separation, which now it's been bridged more now so than before. Now you see different tribes intermingling and so on and so forth, and vice versa, right? The adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Now, at that time, one of the main adversaries of Judah was Ephraim, or the northern kingdom. But in reference to that, when it says they shall be cut off, it doesn't mean that they're going to die, but it means that that rivalry or that hatred or that division between them would cease. Okay. Now, obviously, dealing with the other adversaries of Judah, now they're going to be, you know, put down or taken down. Obviously, not really exterminated, with the exception of Esau, Edom. Okay, but the point it's making here, as it emphasizes again, saying Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not vex Ephraim, meaning the rivalry and the back and forth and the separation between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom would cease to exist, and they would be joined again. Similar to Ezekiel 37, right? Taking the two sticks and joining them. Verse 14, but they shall fly upon the shoulders of the Philistines. See, so this is a part of that vision, right? That there's going to be peace, right? The Messiah is going to bring peace. He's going to gather his people. He's going to basically clean up and fix the nation and join us back together. And being unified, as we go into the subsequent verses, we're going to then take over, right? And subject and dominate these heathens. So verse 14, it says, but they shall fly upon the shoulders of the Philistines toward the west. When you go into that, the word shoulders, you have like the actual literal shoulder, but you also have, and I think that's really what it's meant in this use case. You have the shoulder meaning like location wise, right? Let me actually bring it up so it makes more sense, right? So you have shoulder, shoulder blade, slide, side, slope, but you also have here, right, slope of mountain, right, which is to refer to like location wise, right? Let me come down here. Yeah, so if we look for, right, applied to inanimate things as the side of a building, that's one example. Let's see if I can find the Isaiah 11. Where are we at? There we go. Isaiah 11 and 14, they shall fly upon the shoulder of the Philistine. They shall attack their borders, an image taken from birds of prey, right? So, yeah, I mean, we're physically gonna subject them, but, you know, mainly it's referring to like taking over, because when you look at the actual geographic location, the Philistines were on our west, right? When you look at the land of Israel, the Philistines were on the west of Israel, right? So basically, this takeover, we would basically take everything over, right? So it starts with the Philistines on the west, right? They shall spoil them of the east together. And then it starts to go into more detail. And Isaiah is saying this because at his time, those that were on the east of us were still in their respective lands, right? They shall lay their hand upon Edom, which was near us, right? Bordered to us, and Moab, which was also bordered to us on our east. And the children of Ammon shall obey them. So we're going to basically subject these heathens and take them over. Now, when this is actually fulfilled, right now Moab is in their respective lands. Neither are the children of Ammon, right? They're not in the lands that their forefathers dwelt in, but neither are we, right? But it's still our land. So the point here is similar to Amos chapter 9, verse 11 and 12. Let me actually pull that up real quick. The Lord is going to unify Israel, and then we're going to take over these heathens, subjecting them and taking over their lands. Basically, it's all going to be ours. And of course, after a period of time in captivity, then, you know, they would have their lands restored back to them, though they would still be subject unto us. This is Amos chapter 9, verse 11. In that day will I raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof, and I will raise up his ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old, right? So you would have the remnant, which make up the house of David. They would be gathered together, and there would be no divisions, no separations, none of that. So it's going to be a tight, you know, unit, as it says, and build it as in the days of old, that they may possess the remnant of Edom and of all the heathen, which are called by my name, saith the Lord, that doeth this. So going back to Isaiah chapter 11, verse 15, and the Lord Yahweh shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea, Now in verse 15 and verse 16, this is to represent the Lord making a way for us to return. All right. Or in essence, like, making a path for us to be delivered or returned back. And so the visual that it gives here, and I'll read this in like another translation as well, but it's similar to when the Lord made a way for us when we were escaping or fleeing out of ancient Egypt. So it says here, he shall destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea, and with his mighty wind shall he shake his hand over the river, and shall smite it in the 7 streams, and make men go over dry shod. Now, starting with the tongue of the Egyptian sea, when you go into this, I believe it's dealing with that region of like the Gulf of Suez or the Red Sea, and the tongue being the location or the shape of it. Let's go into the word tongue first. And it says here, right, so you have the tongue of men, right, literally, but you also have here like a wedge or bay of sea that is tongue shaped. And so if we go back to Isaiah 11 and read in this, I think it's a bit clearer in the NLT, right? The Lord will make a dry path through the gulf of the Red Sea. He will wave his hand over the Euphrates River, sending a mighty wind to divide it into 7 streams, so it can easily be crossed on foot. And similarly, right, when you read in the book of Revelation, it describes how the Lord is going to basically dry up that river Euphrates so that the kings of the earth may be able to make their way through there, right, to come to the battle. So there's different precepts that point to the Lord drying up that body of water to make it crossable for you to walk on foot, right? And when you see here, it says, and with his mighty wind shall he shake his hand over the river. The term the river, when you read in the King James Version, is usually, if there is no actual name associated with it, it's typically referring to the Euphrates River, right? Because if you go in here, and this isn't the only place you'll see that, but if you go into the term here, the river, which I can probably even do a word search on it. Let's see. The river. Yeah, so for some of them, it'll tell you what river it's talking about. But in cases where it just mentions the river, it's in most cases it's referring to the river Euphrates. And if there's no like context here, so let me see if I can find one here. Actually, let's do it by the actual Strong's. Yeah, H5104. So here, the other use cases of H5104. Let's see here. Right, so I think this is, let me see, is this one of them? And I will set thy bounds from the Red Sea even unto the sea of the Philistines, and from the desert unto the river, for I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and thou shalt drive them out before thee. Let's see. I think that might be one of them, but I might have to read that again to see if it's referring to that. There we go. River Euphrates, the river Euphrates, the great river, the river Euphrates, the flood, side of the flood. All right, I think this is one of them. So it says here, and Hadarezer sent and brought out the Syrians that were beyond the river, and they came to Helam, and Shobach, the captain of the host of Hadarezer, went before them. Now, and also here's another one, 1 Kings 4:21, and Solomon reigned over all kingdoms from the river onto the land of the Philistines, even onto the border of Egypt. They brought presents and served Solomon all the days of his life. Once again, 1 Kings 4:24, and he had dominion over all the region on this side the river, and then it mentions the different locations there. This is also another one, right? 1 Kings 14 and 15. For the Lord shall smite Israel as a reed is shaken in the water, and he shall root up Israel out of this good land which he gave to their fathers, and shall scatter them beyond the river, because they have made groves, or they have made their groves, provoking the Lord to anger. So that where that river was beyond the Euphrates River, because that's where you're going more towards Assyria, right? And so now in these various precepts here, I'm pretty sure if we look up these precepts in a different translation, some translations just go right ahead and just translate it as the Euphrates. Let's see if they, yeah, so NIV, for example, Hadad-ezer had Arameans brought from beyond the Euphrates River. Once again, ESV, from beyond the Euphrates, from beyond the Euphrates. So the point here is to show you that, so oftentimes when you read the term the river, and it doesn't have, like in the King James Version, it doesn't attribute the name of it, it's usually referring to the Euphrates River. Okay, so looking here as another example, the river, right? NLT, Solomon ruled over all the kingdoms from the Euphrates River. So some of these other translations will just, rather than infer and let you infer, they'll just tell you straight up it's talking about the Euphrates River, right? When it says the river. Let's do one more. 1 Kings 14 and 15. Yeah, beyond the river, talking about the scattering of the northern kingdom. Where's the term? There we are. Right, NLT, beyond the Euphrates River. NIV, beyond the Euphrates River. So just a few examples to show sometimes you see the term the river, it's referring to the Euphrates. Okay, so going back to this visual here that Isaiah is giving in Isaiah chapter 11, verse 15, it's basically saying here, as we continue into 16, the Lord is going to, as it says, utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea. And so that's, like we read in the NLT, a visual of like drying up that body of water. And then he then mentions how the Lord is pretty much going to also dry up parts of the Euphrates to make it to where men can go over. When it says dry shod, it means like you can walk on it, right, with your sandals, and it'll be like bare ground that you can walk on. Verse 16, and there shall be an highway for the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, like as it was to Israel in the day that he came up out of the land of Egypt. See, so that's why it gives that visual in Isaiah 11 and 15 of that body of water that pretty much we had to cross from Egypt into the land of Israel, right, where we walked on dry land. And then it mentions how the Euphrates is going to be dried up. So similarly, those that are in Assyria coming back into the land can walk on dry land, just like we, Israel, walked on dry land through that body of water when we were coming up out of Egypt, right? But once again, this is to represent the Lord making a way or a path to deliver us from the various regions in which we are in, okay? And it's to ultimately signify the gathering of Israel back together, and the Lord giving us that like safe passage to, come back to this unified kingdom. And that pretty much brings us to the end of the book of Isaiah, chapter 11. So as we went through this, it was mainly a vision of this reign of peace that would come with the Messiah, right? Yahushai, starting obviously by his father Yahweh, and he would unify the nation, raise us up, and give us that dominion of the earth once again. So with that, I'm going to end it here. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Ruach HaKodesh. And until next time, Shalom.